I now get to introduce Melanie Greenhouse, who's been a mentor and teacher for me for probably 30 years. I remember being on Block Island and reading about this Arts Café Mystic, thinking that's exactly what I want to do on Block Island. So I did, following Melanie's lead. She made and makes it all seem simple. But there's so much work that she puts into her teaching, her impeccable teaching, with people of all ages. Hopefully, most of you got a copy of the New London Day this morning to read the wonderful piece that Rick Koster wrote about Melanie, which is basically about 40 years of praise wrapped into a page and a half. And he did it well. He covered a lot of bases, Melanie. But what Melanie has quietly, humbly done, I mean, she was the initial voice for the Arts Café Mystic with two other four builders, Christy and Albert were part of it. But they both have said to me what Melanie hasn't said to me, and what she certainly didn't say to Rick Koster. What Albert and Christy told me was that we had this vision, but we just knew we didn't want to do the work. So they've reached out to Melanie, and Melanie did the work, including creating the foundation for this organization, right, for 10 years with limited funds, limited grants. She also, in her very first year, started the Youth Will Be Served program. So it's no coincidence to me that this event happens on the 28th, because it is the 28th anniversary of Youth Will Be Served.
Wow.
And you, Melanie, have done that, and you continue to do it in ways that might seem small, but to me, with my heart and my sensitivity, are huge, including the work that you're doing, bringing different generations together to celebrate the love of language, the love of community, cultivating relationships with kids who might not have elders, right? I'm one of those kids. I knew one grandmother, you know, I didn't know my other three grandparents. So this is huge work that you do, and you do it so humbly and so kindly. So we're so grateful to have you here to share your own poems. Melanie's got a couple books on the back table. Read My Shorts, very funny. And there's a few copies of this. These are small shorts that she wrote. But the biggest accomplishment really is nothing like a deadline to get a poet working. But when I asked Melanie to be the featured poet several months ago, she said, but oh God, I don't have a book. Every featured poet has a book. And I just looked at her and she said, I'll see what I can do. And so this astonishing book called The Republic of Sunlight speaks to its text in the simplicity of its phrasing, which isn't simple at all. These word choices were very well chosen, as are every one of Melanie's choices. Tim Siebel's one of my favorite poets in the world. Didn't hold back for a second when Melanie asked him to write a blurb for her cover. And I do know, because he's a friend of mine, that I've asked him on many occasions to write blurbs for friends, and he just says, I don't do that stuff anymore. So he does that stuff when he knows the poet is just right. So we welcome Melanie Greenhouse with every seed that she's planted in different earths to bring us all here tonight. You are the bomb, Melanie. And I'm honored.
I almost didn't recognize myself. Thank you, Lisa. That is just heartwarming, and my heart is bulging now in the chest. I want to thank you, not only for continuing the Arts Cafe, but continuing the ritual, our annual ritual of honoring our young writers. This is our rare opportunity to get a little window into what's going on in their minds. And boy, is there a lot. We didn't talk about the big issue directly, but I just want to acknowledge the courage these young people have, not just the poets who were very brave getting up, but just the courage it takes to attend school, to be a student, the courage it takes to be a teacher these days. And not to mention parent, grandparent, the whole laundry list I won't go into, but I want to just take a breath to think about it. So, I'm proud of this debut book. The poems have been in my computer for years, actually. It was a manuscript that had been ripening, and when Lisa asked me to be a featured poet, I said, well, maybe I can find a publisher, and Glenn Chaney from New London Librarian jumped on it, and I'm very grateful to him as well. So the first poem, are we ready? Thank you for not leaving. I am the daughter of Czech refugees, and their stories have stayed with me, and I'm going to read a few from The Republic of Sunlight, and the book begins with an epigraph that I lifted from John Hollander, his book of poems called The Poetry of Everyday Life. And it says, "We seem to be subjects of the weathery kingdom, living under the reign of a sunless king, or in later age, moving in the republic of our own sunlight." And that phrase just grabbed me so much, and I thought, I tried to gather the poems that would fit that theme. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Bratislava, to my mother and father. They rarely spoke of the war. Their English, laced with Czech accents, usually embarrassed me, their only child, a steadfast American. My mother played Chopin on the piano. My father played Beethoven on the stereo. Sometimes he would conduct an imaginary orchestra when he was in a good mood. But most of the time he was sad. His hands shook. Often my mother grew hysterical over the simplest things. My father was a chain smoker. Once I found love letters addressed to my mother. They were not in my father's hand. We lived in a modest home, the silver there only a tiny hint of all they'd left behind. After they died, I went all the way to Bratislava, searching for my parents' homes. They never mentioned the castle that loomed like a specter over their city. And I was so pleased to find, thank you, the picture of the castle that they never talked about. So I thought that was a little unusual, but it made me realize there were a lot of other things they weren't talking about. Right? So, this poem is called Piccadilly Circus 1945, and it's coming to you via my mother's telling. And this is an epigraph and a quote from her. "I may not always tell the truth, but what I tell well." I'm going to ditch these guys. They're not helping. My mother told the story of how she'd always had a crush on my father, a man 12 years her senior, his family the first to own a car in Bratislava. Then Hitler forced them both to escape in 1938, their lives torn asunder, sent on different transits to London. 7 years later, it is VE Day, great celebrations throughout London. She would have been 25 years old, my father 37. She described the scene, champagne toasts, throngs gathered on Piccadilly Circus to cheer the end of the war. No more air raids, no more scrambling for bomb shelters. Dancing, how she jumped high into the air. She would have been capable of flight. In 7 years, she had been a refugee, homeless, worked in a factory, then as a nanny, went to college on scholarship, got a degree. She had reasons to fly. She was still young. She was not herded into a concentration camp. She had her looks, her figure. She was alive, airborne, with all the other Londoners and Czech refugees who had gathered on Piccadilly Circus that day in May. Then she landed on a foot. It could have been any foot among the hundreds and hundreds of feet crowding into Piccadilly Circus that day. But when she looked up at the face that belonged to the foot, it was him, Polly Anwald, the man whose family owned the first car in Bratislava, the man who would become my father. Whether it's true or not. I still like the story, either way. So this next poem is also in the book. When many years later, when I was born and we would go on family vacations, my mother was always very nervous and skittish, and it took me a lifetime to understand why. This is called On the Line. She pleaded with me, "We must leave on time, pack up, let's go. Don't dawdle, that's a crime. We can't afford to miss the ship, the plane, the bus, the taxi, the bulging tin train. Don't waste time, quick, get in or else you stay." Why the rush? The mountains, beaches, freeway aren't going anywhere. Mother's nerves taut on edge. Wait, my diary, my doll. My dawdling must have driven her insane. Too bad, she snapped. Once on the road, we can't turn back. Mother drives, highway lines blur. We're caught speeding. Officer broad-brimmed with ticket, tears beyond humiliation, dredged from years ago. Drugstore stop for medication to calm her nerves. We call this vacation. Now she visits me and stays a few days. Our memories merge on the matured highway as we race to catch the earliest plane. She wrings her hands, conversation a strain, until we're there, on time. That's essential. Hands untangle, she becomes celestial as the plane flies her through her history, leaving me on earth to tell her stories of the days she stashed family treasures into hems, shoulder pads, hollow-heeled shoes. Her mother shoved her onto the last train out of Bratislava. The Nazis came. My dawdling must have driven her insane. Each vacation she had to leave on time. I never knew her life was on the line. True story. Let's see, I'm gonna leave the book for a little bit and then take you on a tour of my old stone and stucco house in Noank. I don't know how many of you have been in that house. Jim, Linda, Linda, definitely. Linda helped me move out of that house. And Michael grew up. This is my youngest baby. I have a poem for you guys later. So I'll read a few from it's in a manuscript called Deep Inside the Stone Quiet House, which is still ripening in my computer. Deep inside the stone quiet house. The judge's brother, who built this fortress in 1910, was after something permanent, something impervious to nature's malevolence. So he recruited Italian stonemasons who chiseled these hundreds of granite blocks which rose above a stone foundation. The same Italians who carved the headstones in the local cemeteries, their bodies answering the ancestral call of some genetic code, their muscles chiseled like atlases. And then the judge's brothers hired woodworkers, craftsmen from the Palmer shipyard, men from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, to fashion mahogany panels for the dining room, and stair rails thick and smooth as well-oiled alarms, woods dark, red, rich from the jungles of Brazil, hardwood floors, solid mahogany doors with knobs of carved glass, wagon loads of slate hauled from state quarries of Vermont, laid on the roof like fish scales glistening in an October sun. Then the house was done, and it wasn't going anywhere. Then the families came and went, Fitches, Berries, Moores, greenhouses. My sons toddled up these stairs with their flannels and blankets, and came down young men who packed up and moved away. Then their father followed. Now I am the single occupant, listening to this house as it makes the noises old houses make. Sometimes it says to me, I'm not going anywhere. And sometimes I whisper my reply, don't worry, neither am I. But I did. I moved. It was just too much house, too much yard. So, let's see. I had this time down to 30 minutes, so I'm going to skip that poem. One feature of this house is that it had so many doors. Yeah, my cup is heavy. So many doors, and it just led me to think this should be a poem. So I'm going to give you a tour through the doors. The doors, an inventory. I imagine a woman invented the first door so that at last she could enjoy a little privacy. Then men took over the patent and began building doors by the dozen, one after another. Doors were all the rage in the age of enlightenment. This house contains doors in abundance. The dining room has 3, the living room 2. There's a door to the downstairs study, a door to the back stairwell, a door to the basement, a door to the coat closet, 2 doors from the laundry room, which doubles as a bathroom, awkward. A door to the boys' room, with 2 closets and their doors, a door to the guest room, a door to the master bedroom, and 2 more doors from master bedroom to guest room, enclosing a small passageway. All mahogany doors, 16 so far, a door to the attic, a door to the master bathroom, 3 closets in the hallway, each with a door. 21 doors. And I ignore the doors that lead to the outside, French doors to the east patio. At the main entrance, a glass panel door in a mahogany frame that creates a vestibule, a transition between outside and inside. The leaded glass panel front door with a deadbolt, which conveys an austere message. That's 24 doors. So many doors opening and shutting for over a century. All those hands, young, old, middle-aged, turning all those glass knobs, doors slammed in furious rages, doors gently closed so as not to wake the three slumbering superheroes, dreaming of their escapes into the future. And the music of the hinges, singing their songs as they open and shut, keeping voices contained or releasing them into the world. And I have forgotten yet two more doors, the French doors that lead to this study, every shelf cluttered and stacked with smaller book-shaped doors into the mind. 26 solid mahogany doors, and I may have omitted some. Imagine the first person to enter a room with a door, to be finally safe within a space. Imagine the first person to be locked out, how that must have felt. And I'll read one more about the old house. Do you like that? How many of you live in old houses? Wow. Okay, so you can sort of relate to this. And do you remember all those doors, Michael? Specters. In this old stone and stucco house float the voices of previous occupants, the children who grew up and left, the mothers and fathers who sang or scolded or cooked or sat stoop-shouldered over a stack of bills at an old roll-top desk. The voices of the stonemasons who laid the stones and spread the mortar between the blocks. The voices of the craftsmen who carved the wood, the glaziers who set the panes of glass sealed with beads of lead. I will not allow myself to think of the ephemeral beings who haunt the attic, or the ones lurking in the basement or in the room down there that no one enters. It is an exercise to banish from my mind even the idea of a vaporous maid standing at the old soapstone washtub, or the misty shape of a judge wearing a cravat and spats up in the attic. I try not to be startled when I hear footsteps overhead or feel a sudden rush of air sweep by my face when I venture into the dungeon below to check on the hot water heater or the gauge of my fuel tank. The less I know of these spirits, the better. Do you remember the basement in that house? Okay. Mike and Kate helped me move out of that house. Linda especially helped me up in the attic. Oh my gosh. So, yeah. Old houses. Woo. I am going to read some poems that are not in any manuscript, and this first one's probably going to get me into trouble. Yay. It's called Social Security. And this is a true, sort of a true story. Most of it is true. Social Security. The agent's name was Jessica. Straight dark hair, eyebrows plucked in an arc of perpetual surprise. A name tattooed on her right wrist, a permanent bracelet, the lettering indistinct. She played the keyboard, entering my Social Security numbers. Then she entered the numbers of my ex, which I recited to her by heart. It was my choice whether to start the payments now or to wait until I turned 65, when I might be dead. I was advised by those in positions of authority to begin ASAP, if not sooner. Jessica entered the dates we were married, the dates we were divorced, where the marriage took place, where the divorce took place, where we went on our first date, where we went on our last date. What did we ever see in each other? How could we have stayed married for so long? 32 years, some of them happy. Some of these questions Jessica did not ask. I asked Jessica why the monthly amount was so small. She answered in the language of more numbers, which I never spoke fluently. She gathered sheets of documents together, using whiteout to hide the Social Security numbers of my ex that I had just recited to her. She was embarrassed that she had to do this since I knew his numbers and she knew that I knew. Just a formality, she chirped. Then she said, if your ex-spouse were to pass away, you would be entitled to 80% of his Social Security checks in addition to your own. She noticed the look that entered my eyes. I noticed the color that rose up her neck until her entire face from chin to plucked eyebrows turned a deep shade of crimson. Of course, she added, if you were to be the cause of his passing, that would disqualify you from his benefits. A lot of ex-spouses get that look in their eyes. I appreciate the laughter. Anyway. So after I worked Arts Café job, I found work in assisted living communities doing memory care. And one of the places I worked would have these weekly socials. And this is a scene that I will never forget. And I just so enjoyed working with our elders. But this was, what, more water? Yes, thank you. This was a scene that was just too present for me not to put in a poem. So, at the assisted living community, Pauline and Margarita get down. The Wednesday afternoon socials at the assisted living community, where all the seniors gather for a sip of alcohol-free, unknown to them, wine. They unzip their ancient costumes worn to fool others into thinking they are nonagenarians, cast aside their walkers and wheelchairs, and get down to the sounds of ABBA. Take a chance on me. Margarita, with a rose between her dentures, starts to shimmy, shimmy, shake. Pauline sees, and not to be outdone, rises from her wheelchair and gets her shoulders moving in what can only be described as a dance to give the Grim Reaper a run for his money. Then the gents begin to shed their weathered, leathery skins. The World War II pilot, the sailor who survived a ship sinking in the Pacific. JP grabs his honey, drapes himself over her warm neck, entwined like teenagers in high school, and they sway to the music. Take a chance on me. Life force pulsating through the social hall. Then the music ends. Margarita and Pauline pull on their old costumes again, the ones with the fake wrinkles and the arthritic hands, and face the rest of the afternoon in the waning sunlight. Are we okay? Yeah. All right. Okay. Then I'll read more? Yes. So, this next one I am dedicating to my 3 sons, Paul, Ian, and Michael. This is a poem that obviously was written when I lived in Knowing. The Orionids, October 20th, 2012. At 2:30 a.m., I am at the town dock in pajamas and overcoat, searching the eastern sky for meteor showers. The prediction of 20 comets per hour, somewhat exaggerated. Orion's belt shines fiercely over the sound. Latimer light blinks on and off on the horizon. I wait and wait. Then One comet streaks from north to south, its tail long and distinct. Then a second one glides directly up into the dome. A third leaves a diagonal trail, then fades. 3 good-sized comets. Each one elicits shouts of appreciation from the boisterous group of college students off to my left. They fill the otherwise silent night with current songs and jovial banter peppered with salty language. 3 comets. I decide I will end my vigil after 3. They streaked across the star-studded sky, and in an instant, they were gone. But not really, he's still here. So, the next poem I'm dedicating to the woman who came to work for my family. She was an African-American woman who essentially raised me from the age of 2 until I was 18. There's a whole play about that, but I tried to do a good deed for her on one of my visits to the Eastern Shore. It's called A New Couch for Chessie. That had been my plan, to visit Bayside near Onancock on the Eastern Shore of Virginia. She had the same couch my parents gave her in 1958. Volunteers were on standby to move out the old couch and move in the new. Then I hit a roadblock. What do I need a new couch for when this one suits me fine? She peeled away 3 layers of coverings to reveal a battered arm bandaged with duct tape. She proudly showed me the plywood planks she had placed beneath each cushion for extra support. She spoke of how sturdy the legs still were. What do I need a new couch for? I was now in her country, the land of self-denial, making do with what the good Lord allotted her, giving what she could spare to her church. She didn't expect much out of life. Who was I to impose my obsessions on her, my chronic need for creature comforts? Chessie was content to make do with other people's cast-offs. No amount of cajoling would ever convert her to my religion. As a side story, each one of my sons were bar mitzvahed, and for each bar mitzvah, she gave them each a silver bracelet, which they don't wear, but I do. And so Paul, Ian, and Michael are on my wrists. So, and this poem happens to be in the Republic of Sunlight. And when I was a coming of age young girl, maybe 13 or so, 12, 13, young girls were introduced to training bras. I don't know why.
My brother would go choo choo when I first wore mine.
Oh, so you had training bras.
My whole family was in reports that I was getting one. My brother just walked in the house going choo choo. Terrible.
So this is an older poem, but I hope I don't embarrass any young women over there. Are you okay with this? All right.
I'll try it.
Training bra. Through the gauzy haze of memory, I asked myself, training what? What were we training them to do? 2 innocent orbs, mosquito bites, my mother's friends would tease, on the verge of becoming a danger to mankind, voluptuous criminals in cahoots to what? Rob banks, commit fraud, crimes against humanity. True young breasts can behave beastly at times. They can be rude, insolent, insubordinate, play dumb, stare back, refuse to talk. They do not come with an operator's manual or a habeas corpus. Breasts can humiliate their owner. In retrospect, society may have been right Young bosoms need to learn discipline early. Rowdy ones bound into submission, incorrigible ones sent off to reform school. Gaudin's Tahitian beauties would have been much better off in training bras. All those young, nubile African bosoms in decades of National Geographic would have thrived in training bras. Just look at American bosoms, how sharp-witted they are, how they glow in the dark. So, can you handle 3 more? Yeah. Okay. As long as there's laughter, right? I do try, humor is so important to me. I have so many serious poems, but I just do value humor in poetry. So to hear laughter just gives me such a lift. Anyway, so I've moved to this new place in Columbia to be closer to Mike and Kate, my 2 darling grandsons, Eli and Wynn. And in this, I've discovered a whole new set of insects that were not in knowing. So this is a relatively new poem. It's called The Plight of the Carpenter Bee. Okay. Sawdust appeared on my car, parked in the carport. Odd, since no one I knew was sawing or renovating from above. One day, an obese, unemployed bee showed up for work with his little tool belt to begin drilling into the wooden support beams. Was it in search of food? There were no morsels so far as I could tell inside the beams. Was it carving a sculpture? Was it drilling for oil? Was it willfully vandalizing my property out of sheer disdain for the human race? How to stop the destruction? Trip to the local hardware store, a can of spray repellent for wasps, ants, and bees in the carpentry trade, equipped with a straw for precise aim. The blimp of this bee buzzed into view. I took aim and blasted the hoodlum midair. It flew off and kept returning. More sawdust. This would be a long and protracted war. Over time, it developed no small respect for my enemy, who was at the mercy of his own insect instincts. But I got the sense that my repeated assaults were starting to take a toll. Its takeoffs were becoming sluggish. I was beginning to weaken as well, showing signs of empathy, as often happens to me when observing the perplexing behaviors of nature's beasts. I soften, then my killer instincts return. One afternoon, I caught it in a V, eye level, grabbed my weapon and blasted the holy crap out of it. Covered with a white foam, this brave soldier dropped with a thunderous thud at my feet. The end, or so I thought. By God, the white blob began to crawl to a foxhole, and the horror show continued. Time stood still. I solemnly covered the spectacle of this death march with a clump of brittle oak leaves, raised my right foot, and stomped it into oblivion, the leaves shielding me from its final agony. Next morning, I cleared the leaves away, expecting to see a flattened corpse. But the body of the bee was gone. Go figure. We're in the home stretch. So I've given up, I've traded lighthouses and sailboats for silos and cows. And I have fallen in love with cattle farms. And some of the cows are just beautiful. So this poem is another Columbia poem. I've looked at cows from both sides now. I don't know why I love cows the way I do. I don't know why, I just do. They don't seem to mind my long gazing, enchanted by their slow, languorous, lush green grazing. A few different breeds lounge bellies down on moist clods of earth warmed by April sun, calm bovines all in a meditative chew, like a four-legged minor league baseball team. One pure white Charolais, a breed of cattle, right? Approaches me. My daughter-in-law's a veterinarian. One pure white Charolais approaches me. I think she wants to communicate, maybe in French. And instead, she lifts her tail to void her many stomachs. And Angus in the distance parts her hind legs to take a leisurely whiz. A Jersey ambles over to the water trough for a long, cool drink. She has worked up a thirst, doing nothing all day. Then the Charolais decides it's time to take a stroll from corral to pasture with an emerald hill rising in the bucolic backdrop. She pauses on the well-worn path to let out a low, sustained maw in B-flat. This is apparently a signal for the others to rise out of their lethargy and take a power walk. One by one, they follow her command, single file. Each set of cloven hooves marches in slow motion. The older ones pause on the ridge to take a look at me. They want to know what I do for a living. They feel a little sorry for me with my single stomach. But allow me to take their photo. I don't know why I love cows the way I do. I may need to give up tenderloin. Think more seriously about veggie burgers. You've been such a gracious audience. Thank you so much for not leaving. Thank you. Exquisite flute playing. Oh my gosh. How often do you hear a high school student? Students, I so enjoyed working with all of you this afternoon. It was such a rich, wonderful. So this last one is called Sonnet on Whitman's Brain. Walt Whitman was a firm believer in the science or pseudoscience of phrenology, which is the study of the shape and size of the skull as it relates to intellect. So this is what happened when he had bequeathed his brain to a lab. Sonnet on Whitman's Brain. What sort of technician was hired to work in that lab? Your average hungover microcephalic twit who stumbled across the room with a slippery mass? Did those who watched in horror say, "Oh, shit"? For the sake of accuracy, it was Whitman's brain, not your average tissue spread over the floor. Never to be dissected, analyzed, or stained, preserved for students of cranial corridors. But there was that charismatic poet's genius, and there, in cortical disarray, cells that grew each blade and leaves of grass. No doubt that hapless twit was made to pay. In any event, the mind that stood behind phrenology was spared America's singing.